Well, it took precisely 1 day after President Bush endorsed John McCain for us to hear that once familiar refrain. In our third story tonight, we're in danger, but we're safe, and now only McCain can keep us that way. Today, the chief of the U.S. Northern Command told reporters al-Qaeda may be stepping up plans to attack the U.S. and that they're willing to try to affect our elections. Using fear to affect our elections? Who would be so monstrous? Almost instantly after the story hit the Associated Press, military and Homeland Security officials reinforced to the media, including NBC News, that there is no new intelligence behind any of this. In other words, don't be afraid any more than you need to be to make you keep us in office. Or you can say, no new intelligence? I could tell. Just yesterday, the president invoked the prospect of terror to bolster his endorsement of McCain, promising that Senator McCain can make us safe because, quote, he's not going to change when it comes to taking on the enemy. No change whatsoever from current U.S. policies in the abandoned, quote, war, unquote, against al-Qaeda or in Iraq. Mr. Bush's need to stay in Iraq, claiming along the way yesterday not one but two fundamental constitutional principles in one fell swoop. Mr. Bush at this moment has American envoys in Iraq bearing draft agreements that will codify U.S.-Iraqi relations after the UN mandate for our presence there expires on December 31st. Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State David Satterfield telling Congress in a letter yesterday that Mr. Bush and presumably a President McCain can negotiate their own agreements with Iraq and even send troops there in perpetuity without any congressional approval. This despite the Constitution's specific delegation to Congress to make power, or the power to make war, and to the Senate of the power to ratify treaties. Mr. Satterfield claimed the original authorization for military force in Iraq from 2002 essentially gives any president the unilateral, unchecked power to commit American resources, including future troops, anywhere within Iraq. Let's turn now to John Dean, White House counsel in the Richard Nixon administration and most recently the author of Broken Government, How Republican Rule Destroyed the Legislative, Executive, and Judicial Branches. John, a pleasure. Great thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Keith.
Is the Bush administration technically right here? Did Congress abdicate so much responsibility with such haste and abandon 6 years ago that he really does pretty much have free reign?
Well, the Bush administration has certainly interpreted the authorization to use force resolution in that way. It's clear not all of Congress thought that, but certainly the Republicans didn't try to check him in any way when he tried to broadly interpret it and has tried to broadly interpret it. So yes, in essence, they did abdicate an awful lot of authority.
Is this one of the points of your previous book, Worse Than Watergate, about that 2002 Iraq vote being what they call in math a tautology, that when it comes to the thresholds that the administration had to prove had been met before they could actually act in Iraq, they proved them to Congress by saying to Congress, hey, look, we just proved them. Want to see us prove them again? I mean, this sorry Congress, you already approved perpetuity staging in Iraq. Is this part of this one giant, same, permanent, self-fulfilling prophecy?
They have certainly stretched this resolution far beyond anything anybody could have ever believed was in that resolution. Keith, this is going to have a very interesting snapback for the next president, actually, because whenever a president comes to Congress again to seek any kind of authorization, they're going to button it down pretty tightly. So whether it's whoever that next president might be, if they do need additional authority, Congress is going to be very wary. I think Bush is playing a dangerous game by pushing it the way he is.
Narrowing it to the issue of Iraq, can Congress rescind, redefine any powers that it finds it knowingly or unknowingly turned over, and if so, how?
Well, and yes, they can. What they can do, theoretically, a president can bind through an executive agreement like he's trying to now negotiate with Iraq, any kind of deal he wants to. And only is he checked by the funding of it, by Congress not providing the money he needs. So, yes, that's where the Congress can check this, is one with the money, or they can, as Senator Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have both introduced legislation to try to check him in undertaking these activities. Congress isn't likely to act on that, though.
Why is it, let's go back to a fundamental here to close, why does the Constitution force the President to get approval from the Senate before signing treaties and from approval from Senate and House before waging war? I mean, surely before phones and video conferences, they would have had more reason to fear waiting for Congress in the face of an imminent threat, no?
Well, the fundamentals were quite obvious to the founders of the country, who believed that the people of the country collectively ought to be making this decision, and that's best represented through one or both houses of Congress, not the president, who was theoretically not really a spokesperson for the people, but he was elected by an electoral college initially that is now broadly interpreted by later presidents to give him a mandate. This isn't exactly what the Constitution says. It's the way particularly recent Republican presidents have interpreted the Constitution, however.
This one, most particularly. John Dean, author of Broken Government. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Keith.